I sat in the police interrogation room of my hometown, flanked by my friend and attorney, Ralph Boston. For the second time in the last 5 minutes, Ralph whispered to me, "Lucas, I advise you again not to say anything, just invoke your right to counsel." I'm Lucas Worthington, a name that oozes sophistication, especially when you add my rarely used middle name, Rockefeller. Thanks to my parents' wealth, I'm filthy rich, but I've made my own fortune as a dot-com whiz, boasting a net worth of over $50 million at just 29 years old. Despite my wealth, I'm just a regular guy who enjoys beer, pickup basketball, baseball games, and volunteering at the charity I founded for underprivileged kids in my city's poorer neighborhoods. Now, I'm about to face interrogation by 2 detectives regarding the untimely murder of my beautiful but unfaithful wife, Ashley, and one of her lovers, Brad Sidley, at Sidley's apartment a couple of nights ago. While I'm not particularly devastated by their deaths, as Ashley's infidelity had prompted me to file for divorce, Brad was someone I had roughed up on 2 occasions, not over Ashley but because of his abrasive personality. Detective Roy Benson entered the room, followed by rookie Detective Will Watson, who had recently been promoted despite his lack of intelligence. As Benson began to speak, I interrupted, asserting, "First of all, Detective Benson, I'm not your friend, so you'll refer to me as Mr. Worthington." Before I could finish, Watson snickered and muttered, "Entitled ass." Turning to Watson, I stared him down and remarked, "You know, Will, every time I see you, I think of the movie Animal House." As confusion clouded Watson's face, I continued, "I remember Dean Wormler telling Flounder, fat, dumb, and ugly is no way to go through life, son. You so remind me of Flounder, and to facilitate this interview, keep your fat, dumb, and ugly mouth shut, or I'll have to handle you like I did in the locker room back in high school." My comment triggered a memory for me, but not a pleasant one for Watson. I recalled an incident during our junior year at Hudson High when he had provoked me in the locker room after football practice. I knocked him down, subdued him, and dunked his head in a toilet, resulting in my suspension from a game, a consequence I deemed worthwhile. "There's no reason to talk like that, Mr. Worthington," Benson snapped. "Then tell your lapdog to shut the fuck up." "I'd like to give this interview, but I'm not tolerating his attitude," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. Watson seemed eager to confront me, but his cowardice held him back. "You might question my decision to provoke a police officer who could complicate matters for me. The explanation will be evident later." Benson muttered something to Watson, who then reclined in his chair, shooting me hostile glances. Before I was rudely interrupted, I intended to mention that this interview proceeds only because your department agreed to videotape the entire session, with the understanding that if you catch me in a lie, it's over. Also, I expect you to ask your questions efficiently because after 2 hours, I'm out, I asserted. "We don't agree to time constraints," Benson retorted, clearly annoyed. "It appears you either didn't consult Chief Jackson or chose not to heed his directives because I made these terms clear to him, and he acknowledged them. Do we agree, or do I leave now?" I challenged. Benson and I engaged in a 30-second stare down before he relented with a begrudging "Fine, let's begin." I ostentatiously removed my watch and set the timer. Benson, with Watson only whispering to him when necessary because he knew I wouldn't respond to his questions, initiated the interrogation. Despite their skepticism, I answered truthfully, knowing they couldn't prove my involvement in my wife's or her lover's death. About an hour in, after a whisper from Watson, Benson questioned, "How do you explain your DNA on Sidley's clothing?" I halted the timer, replaced it on my wrist, and declared, "That's your one lie. Goodbye." Ralph and I promptly stood up and exited the room, ignoring Benson and Watson's protests. As Ralph and I walked to his office nearby, we shared a chuckle. Once in a closed conference room, Ralph quipped, "I can't decide if you're the bravest or the most foolish client I've ever had." "Why not both?" I joked. "What gave you such confidence in dealing with those cops, Lucas?" Ralph inquired. "2 reasons. I'm innocent, and I have an airtight alibi supported by video footage covering the entire window for the murder, which the medical examiner determined to be between noon and 3 p.m. on the 5th of this month." "Where's the video from?" Ralph asked. "It's from a basketball clinic I conducted in a city 90 miles away. The entire event was filmed, starting at 11 a.m., with a lunch break at 12:30 p.m., and concluding at 4 p.m. A police videographer recorded it, and I have a dozen copies secured in my home safe. Let me send a paralegal with you to obtain a copy for me, Ralph suggested with a smile. Only after you treat me to lunch. Dealing with Watson and Benson has left me famished, I chuckled. 2 days later, Watson and around half a dozen other officers executed a search warrant on me at 6:30 a.m. They probably hoped to catch me off guard and cause inconvenience, but I had already been exercising for half an hour. Watson wore a smug grin as he served the warrant. Enjoy yourselves, assholes, I growled as I fetched my bicycle to continue my workout outdoors. And don't think about stealing anything, all my valuables are meticulously cataloged. Watson responded with a curt fuck you. I didn't mind leaving them to search my house because I had nothing to hide, and because I had strategically placed high-tech cameras in every room. These cameras were how I initially caught Ashley cheating, although I never confronted her with that evidence. Upon returning from my bike ride over an hour later, the officers were leaving. Watson spotted me and proudly displayed an evidence bag containing what looked like a gun. Since I didn't own a firearm, I knew it had been planted. However, I remained unfazed knowing that the cameras would capture the planting. After reviewing my camera footage, which took about an hour, I promptly contacted Ralph to update him. 2 days later, I was arrested. Ralph's friend at the police station tipped him off, so he and I arrived at the station just as the task force was preparing to arrest me at my charity, intending to make a spectacle. We had already arranged for 2 local TV stations to be present. They were clearly annoyed that I had preempted their plan, but I simply grinned. Ralph had already filed a request with the most impartial judge in the local court for a bail hearing the following morning. I spent only one night in jail. They placed me in a cell with a tough guy named Melvin Brixey, likely hoping he would harm me. However, their plan backfired for 2 reasons. I caught Melvin off guard by immediately informing him that the cops had likely promised him something to attack me. I followed up by disclosing my wealth and my own tough demeanor, offering to finance the best criminal defense attorney for him if he testified on my behalf. Alternatively, I warned him of my willingness to engage physically until one of us succumbed. Although Melvin could have eventually overpowered me due to his size and background, he warmed up to me because of my assertive approach. When Ralph met me for my bail hearing the next day, I informed him that I would cover Melvin's legal fees and arranged for his senior partner in criminal defense to meet with Melvin that same day. As the 2 jailers escorted me out, I bid farewell to Melvin, leaving them dumbfounded. The district attorney himself, eager for re-election during an election year, attended the bail hearing. He harbored resentment towards my father from previous dealings when he was in private practice and saw my case as an opportunity to boost his profile. His disparaging remarks about me infuriated me, but Ralph remained composed, countering the DA's arguments with reason instead of resorting to insults. Ralph emphasized the disruption to my charity work if I were incarcerated and demonstrated that I posed no flight risk. Eventually, I was released on a $2 million cash bond, with the requirement to surrender my passport but without an ankle monitor. Back at Ralph's office, we swiftly devised our strategy in just over 2 hours, both of us wearing satisfied grins once finished. Ralph immediately had his tech expert refine the DVD of my alibi, compiling pertinent footage from my home cameras during the police search into a concise format. He also began reaching out to alibi witnesses, advising them to limit cooperation with the police. Additionally, Ralph promptly filed a notice with the court asserting our right to a trial within 90 days of my arrest, a significantly shorter timeline than usual, catching both the prosecutor and the court off guard. Most defendants prefer to delay proceedings, but I was eager to expedite the process. Unlike many defendants, I embraced media attention, granting interviews to various outlets, including radio, TV, newspapers, and social media. In each interview, I criticized the DA's incompetence and called out the detectives handling my case, aiming to provoke a response and challenge their credibility. The DA assigned Suzanne Carney, a young but experienced prosecutor who had recently joined his office after a tumultuous divorce, as the lead in my case. Despite her competence, the short preparation time of less than 90 days, coupled with her other obligations and adjustment to a new work environment, proved challenging for her. Consequently, she requested a plea conference with Ralph and me after having the case for about 2 weeks. I agreed, partly because I was curious to meet her. We arrived at Suzanne Carney's office, where she was accompanied by two assistant prosecutors, Benson, Watson, and another woman whose role was unclear and remained unacknowledged. Ralph and I maintained polite demeanor but refrained from extensive conversation. Carney proceeded to outline her case. The murder weapon, a .380 handgun, was discovered in my residence during the search and matched by ballistics. With my DNA present, the alibi video ceased at 1:50 p.m. providing a window for the crime to occur by 3 p.m., the estimated time of death according to the coroner. My motive stemmed from the affair between Sidley and Ashley, with eliminating her being a cost-effective solution to divorce, and my alleged history of confrontations with Sidley, inaccurately reported by a friend. Despite the presented evidence, Carney proposed a plea deal for first-degree manslaughter, offering a sentence of 8 to 15 years in prison. As planned, Ralph and I maintained a composed demeanor throughout her presentation, unsettling her team. Once Carney finished, I politely requested a private meeting with her, without any other parties present. This request surprised Carney's team, who cited ethical concerns about meeting alone with a represented defendant. Ralph clarified that both of us consented to the meeting, alleviating any ethical concerns. After a brief exchange, I suggested dictating a statement to her secretary, confirming our consent to the private meeting. Suzanne agreed and called her secretary to draft the document. While awaiting the document, I engaged Suzanne in casual conversation, aiming to create a comfortable atmosphere. Within minutes, the secretary arrived with the statement, which Ralph and I promptly signed. After witnessing our signatures, the secretary departed to make copies, leaving Suzanne and me alone in the room. Seizing the opportunity, I addressed Suzanne candidly, highlighting concerns about corruption within the police department and incompetence within the DA's office. I warned her of potential embarrassment for both entities if she pursued the case, emphasizing the lack of genuine support from some colleagues. "Do you have anything specific you want to tell me?" Suzanne huffed. "No, I'll save that for trial if you decide to proceed. I'm simply cautioning you that there may be more to the findings regarding the gun and my alibi. I don't want you to bear the brunt of any repercussions. If you choose not to conduct further investigation, I suggest you request the DA to reassign the case," I responded calmly. "Why do you care?" she huffed again. "Because I find you attractive and am seeking a new relationship now that my cheating wife is no longer in the picture. I'd like to get to know you," I replied with a smile. Suzanne appeared stunned, staring at me with her mouth agape for a full 2 minutes. Finally regaining her composure, she asked, "Are you serious, or is this some sort of trick?" "I'll show you how serious I am. Bon Jovi is your favorite performer, right? I'll purchase 2 front-row tickets for his next concert in New York City exactly 123 days from today through my contacts, and I'm inviting you to join me," I said, pulling out my iPhone. After another lengthy pause, she said, "You're crazy. Just tell me whether you accept my plea deal, which expires after today." "Miss Carney, I apologize if I've upset you. Maybe after I'm proven innocent, you'll reconsider. I'll be as respectful as possible. However, to answer your question, I decline your offer and any future plea deals because I am innocent," I stated firmly. While she was still processing my response, I took her hand, kissed it, and exited the room swiftly. As we left the building, I flipped off Watson, eliciting a chuckle from Ralph. "How did it go?" he asked. She turned down my offer for a Bon Jovi concert date in NYC, but I caught her interest. "I'll try again after the trial," I replied. "Will she ever speak to you again after what's about to happen in court?" Ralph inquired. "I hope so," I chuckled. "Maybe she'll have a sense of humor." "Dream on," Ralph laughed. "I won't spoil the outcome of my trial, but there are a few things you should know. The DVD we provided to the prosecution of my alibi seemed to cut off at 1:50, but if played for an additional 30 minutes of static, it resumed at 1:50 and showed my presence until it truly cut off at 4 p.m. If the prosecution had continued playing it, they would have seen this. Additionally, the prosecutor's office was unaware of the prenuptial agreement I had with Ashley. Only my business attorney, Ralph, and a friend of hers who witnessed the signing knew about it. Although we identified her as a witness, the prosecution was unable to locate her, and under local rules, we were not obligated to disclose potential witness statements. Fortunately, we had a competent and no-nonsense judge presiding over the case, although any judge would have sufficed given the strength of our defense. The jury selection process lasted only 2 hours, and our jury consultant, along with Ralph, were satisfied with the outcome. Despite our confidence in our case, we took care to select a fair and impartial jury. The prosecution began by presenting the testimony of the medical examiner, who displayed gruesome photos of the victims and detailed the time and cause of death. His testimony highlighted the time frame of the murders, stating they occurred between noon and 3 p.m. on the 5th, with Sidley sustaining 2.380 bullet wounds to the head and Ashley fatally struck by a through-and-through gunshot. Ralph's cross-examination aimed to clarify the specifics of the time and manner of death. Next, a police witness evaluated my net worth and discussed potential financial implications of divorce, given adultery was not a factor in consideration. Ralph strategically introduced a prenuptial agreement as evidence, limiting Ashley's potential settlement to $50,000 in case of divorce due to infidelity, or $1 million for other reasons. He also exposed the witness's failure to verify the existence of the prenup directly with my business attorney, causing skepticism among jurors. Suzanne proceeded by calling the ballistic and DNA experts, who linked the .380 handgun found in my possession to the murders based on ballistic evidence and DNA traces matching mine on the weapon. Ralph's cross-examination aimed to cast doubt on the reliability of the evidence, highlighting the lack of DNA on the bullets and potential transfer of DNA to the weapon. However, Suzanne's confidence waned when she called Detective Will Watson as her star witness. Watson testified about the discovery of the murder weapon during the search of my house, but his credibility was called into question during Ralph's cross-examination. Ralph presented a photo taken on the day of the search, showing Watson wearing distinctive clothing that contradicted his memory. Watson's uncertain responses undermined his testimony, raising doubts about the reliability of the evidence presented by the prosecution. "I didn't ask if it looks like it. Is this a photo showing your clothes on the day of the search or not? If necessary, we can call Corporal Billings or other officers to testify," Ralph snapped, his tone unpleasant. "Yes, that is what I was wearing on the day of the search," Watson reluctantly admitted. "How often do you wear that tie?" Ralph pressed. "Not often. Actually, it was a new tie, and since it was a big day, I thought I'd wear it," Watson responded. "Were you ever in Mr. Worthington's house before the day of the search?" Ralph inquired. "I don't remember," Watson hesitated. "You don't remember? Are you friends with Mr. Worthington, or were you friends with his former wife, Ashley?" Ralph interrogated. "No," Watson replied. "What possible reason could you have had for being in their house any other time aside from during the search?" Ralph questioned. "I can't recall any," Watson admitted. "You were never in the Worthington residence except the day of the search, were you, Detective Watson?" Ralph demanded. "No," Watson confessed. "Here's a video of someone taking a green toothbrush from Mr. Worthington's bathroom," Ralph revealed, showing a scene from my bathroom camera. "Is that you with your distinctive yellow and red tie, Detective Watson?" "I've never seen this video before," Watson stumbled. "Just answer the question," Ralph insisted. "Yes," Watson reluctantly admitted. "Similarly, is this you taking a piece of red and white clothing from the laundry hamper in Mr. Worthington's laundry room?" Ralph asked, showing another clip. "Yes," Watson reluctantly confessed. "Is this you taking a gun from underneath your tweed jacket in Mr. Worthington's den, rubbing the green toothbrush bristles on it, then rubbing the red and white shirt on it, and then putting it in the top drawer of the cabinet next to the window in Mr. Worthington's den?" Ralph continued, showing damning evidence. "I plead the Fifth Amendment," Watson choked out. "Did you have an affair with Mr. Worthington's wife, Ashley?" Ralph pressed. "I plead the Fifth Amendment," Watson muttered. "Is this a video taken 2 weeks before the murder of you having sex with Ashley in one of Mr. Worthington's guest bedrooms?" Ralph presented the shocking evidence. "I plead the Fifth Amendment," Watson repeated. "No further questions," Ralph concluded, beaming. The courtroom fell silent as Suzanne slowly stood up. "Your Honor, can we have a recess?" "You certainly do need one, Miss Carney." "We'll reconvene in 2 hours," the judge declared, banging her gavel. Every juror was either smiling or shaking their head. Detective Benson was in the courtroom. I approached him and asked, "Are you arresting Watson now?" He appeared dazed but replied, "I don't have a warrant." "But you have probable cause for at least tampering with evidence, if not murder," I asserted. "Murder?" he gasped. "Who do you think killed Ashley and Sidley?" "The guy who planted the murder weapon." "Grow some balls, Benson, and arrest him." I snapped. To my surprise, Benson nodded to the bailiff, and the two of them proceeded to put Watson under arrest. During our lunch, Ralph received a call from Suzanne. She requested a meeting, and we anticipated her announcing the dismissal of the case. However, to our astonishment, she proposed. I talked with the DA, and he said that we'd accept a plea of second-degree manslaughter, only 2 years in jail. Outraged, I exclaimed, "You mean that the asshole Watson who killed my wife will only get 2 years?" Looking embarrassed, Suzanne clarified, "No, I'm offering you that plea deal, since we think that you probably had some relationship with Watson." My anger boiled over. I unleashed a tirade of profanity at her, and she appeared terrified. Ralph had to restrain me to prevent me from confronting her. Though I had no intention of harming her, my anger was palpable. As we stormed out of the conference room, I shouted, "Fuck you, bitch." Ralph lightened the mood as he led me away, whispering, "Does that mean you're not taking her to a Bon Jovi concert in NYC?" I paused for a moment, still seething with anger, before bursting into laughter. Upon reconvening after the 2-hour delay, the judge called the attorneys up to the lectern. They engaged in an animated discussion. When Ralph returned, I inquired about the conversation. He informed me the judge assumed that Suzanne would dismiss with prejudice. When she declined, the judge reprimanded her, but she wouldn't budge, citing that the DA wanted her to continue. I chuckled. Suzanne's case began to unravel when her next witness contradicted Watson's testimony, revealing that Sidley had provoked the fight and I had actually won the altercation. Furthermore, the videographer for my alibi tape confirmed that it showed my presence at the basketball clinic until around 4 p.m., not the 1:50 p.m. cutoff as claimed by the prosecution. Surprised, the prosecutor exclaimed, "I've reviewed the DVD, and it stops at 1:50, with only static afterward. You apparently didn't go past the static, which I have no idea how it got on your copy of the DVD. If you do, you'll see that it continues until 4 o'clock, I clarified. Suzanne handed the witness the remote. He fast-forwarded through the static, showing the rest of the video, and she stopped him once he reached 3 o'clock, then sat down. Ralph had the witness fast-forward to the end, the DVD showing 4:01 p.m., then confirmed that the videographer saw me with his own eyes at the event from about 11 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. With a hangdog look, Suzanne said, "The prosecution rests." Normally at this juncture, the judge dismisses the jury while the defense makes a perfunctory motion for a directed verdict. The judge didn't bother with that. She asked, "Mr. Boston, do you have a motion?" "Yes, Your Honor, I move for a directed verdict of not guilty." "Granted," she said, banging her gavel. "Miss Carney, see me in my chambers." The jury is dismissed with my thanks. The press was eager for an interview afterward. On the courthouse steps, Ralph first spoke about how the prosecution had done me a terrible disservice and how he knew all along what the outcome would be, and if the police and prosecution had been honest, the case never would have been brought. He was slightly circumspect in his remarks. I, on the other hand, was not. After Ralph spoke, I stated that anyone who voted for the dishonest DA in the upcoming election was a fool, that Watson was the murderer, and that the police should investigate their own. I also announced that I would be filing a lawsuit against the DA for false prosecution. Another attorney in Ralph's firm filed the suit the very next day, naming both the DA and Suzanne, whom I considered a gutless twit, and also Detective Watson. The local media covered the story extensively. The DA and police chief were in hiding. 3 days after the dismissal, as I was finishing up at my charity for the day after running an after-school program for underprivileged girls and boys, a young woman approached me. I vaguely recognized her. "Mr. Worthington, I'm Shirley Williams," she said, extending her hand. I shook it and then said, "I think that I've seen you before, but am having trouble placing you." Yes, although we were not introduced, I was sitting in the conference room when you had your first plea negotiation with Miss Carney, and I attended your trial. Now it clicked. Despite her understated dress and intentionally quirky glasses, I had noticed her attractiveness before, and seeing her now, standing up and facing me, she looked even better. What was your relationship to my case? I asked, holding onto her hand a little longer than necessary or appropriate. I am an intern who had just graduated law school and was observing. My internship will be over next week. Miss Carney was too embarrassed to come see you herself, so she asked me to talk to you, Shirley explained. Let's go to my office, I suggested, making small talk with her as we walked a short distance from the recreation center where I had conducted the after-school program to my office building. When we entered my office, I offered her a seat. She looked around. Your office is much nicer and neater than I was expecting, she commented. Sorry to disappoint you, I smiled. She smiled back and continued, everyone on the prosecution team is chagrined at the lapses in judgment that occurred during your case, but is puzzled about the static gap in the DVD you gave as your alibi. They are puzzled, are they? I smiled again. Also, Miss Carney and everyone else involved really want to apologize for everything. If things had been investigated more thoroughly, the case would have been dismissed before trial. Do they? I smiled again. After a pause, Shirley said, You're not going to make this easy, are you? Why should I? I smiled again. Shirley sighed. Also, Miss Carney wants to know what she can do to get you to drop your suit against her. After a long pause, I asked, Why are you here instead of her? I think that after your tirade against her on the final day of the trial, she's afraid of you. Why was she such a gutless twit before I went off on her? She should have stood up to the DA and dismissed the case immediately after Watson's testimony. She realizes that now and sincerely apologizes. Let me ask you some questions. Obviously, you don't have to answer them, but if you don't, you can get up and leave without any comment from me. Understood? Yes, she apprehensively responded. How old are you? 26. Are those glasses fake? Yes. Why do you wear them? To discourage guys from hitting on me. Are you in a present romantic relationship? No. Are you heterosexual? Yes. What are your plans after your internship is over at the end of next week? I hope to be offered a job in the prosecutor's office, but if not, I'll get a job at a local law firm since I like this area. I already have 2 possible opportunities. What are you doing Saturday night? I don't have any present plans. Maybe my female roommate and I will go to a club. What's your personal cell phone number? XXXXXXXX. All of my questions, and all of her answers, were delivered completely deadpan, with no emotion or facial expressions from either of us. After a thoughtful pause, I stated, Please convey to Miss Carney that if you're offered a job in the prosecutor's office, I'll drop the suit against her. Also, tell her to inform the DA that if he issues a sincere public apology, and if Watson is indicted for my former wife's murder in addition to his present tampering charge, and if you are indeed offered a job at the prosecutor's office, I'll dismiss the case against him. Shirley's face lit up with a grin. Are you pulling my leg? I remained stoic. Absolutely not. In fact, let me formalize it in writing. I quickly drafted the terms on my computer, printed the document, and signed and dated it. At the bottom, I added, Otherwise, I'll see you in court. Handing the paper to Shirley, she reviewed it with a smile and said, Thank you, Mr. Worthington, while extending her hand. Let's pause for a moment. Subscribe to the channel and write your opinion in the comments. Let's continue the story. As we shook hands, I replied, You're welcome, Ms. Williams. Watching her exit my building from my window, I dialed her cell phone. She pulled it out, checked the caller ID, and answered with a smile, Shirley Williams. Hi, Ms. Williams, I greeted, this is Lucas Worthington. The same Lucas Worthington I just met with, she asked with a hint of amusement. The one and only. I understand you're free Saturday night, and I was wondering if you'd like to join me for dinner and the Mousetrap at Artists Playhouse. It's the longest-running play in history. I noticed her broad smile from my window. After a brief pause, she replied, "Yes, I'd love to, Mr. Worthington. Should I meet you at the restaurant?" "No, if you don't mind, please text me your address, and I'll pick you up at 6:15 on Saturday," I suggested. "Will do," she agreed, still smiling. After she hung up, I saw her typing on her smartphone, and moments later, my phone beeped with her address and a smile emoji. Between Shirley's visit on Tuesday and our Saturday dinner, I arranged for a private investigator to compile a thorough report on her. I wanted to ensure she wasn't another gold digger like Ashley, and I was intrigued by the connection we shared during our brief meeting. The report revealed she had a messy divorce during her first year of law school due to her husband's infidelity. Despite the setback, she excelled academically, engaged in part-time charity work, and came from a respectable background with well-regarded parents, a doctor and an artist, and two accomplished older brothers. When I arrived to pick up Shirley, she looked fantastic in understated yet classy attire, with light makeup and her hair styled attractively, and she wasn't wearing fake glasses. Before we left, I asked to meet her roommate. I engaged in conversation with her roommate and gave her 2 tickets to a concert at a local venue for the following weekend, which seemed to impress both of them. Our dinner together with Shirley turned out to be the most unconventional one I've ever had. After some small talk on our way to the restaurant, my choice, as it offered the best value in the city, we had only been seated for a minute when Shirley made an unexpected statement. "Do we really need to exchange basic information about each other, Lucas? I mean, I already know almost everything pertinent about your background from the police and prosecutor's office investigation leading up to your trial, and I'm sure you've had experienced people do a deep dive on me. Why don't we just focus on what makes us tick, what brings us joy, and our life goals? Important stuff like that, not where we went to school or how many siblings we have." I was taken aback, but not as much as I thought I would be. "Okay, you first. What are your short-term and long-term goals in life?" I responded with a grin. The thorough background investigation I had conducted on Shirley, combined with our conversation during our 101-minute dinner, meant that I knew her about as well as anyone else in my life. We had to skip dessert to make it to the show on time, but since we both agreed that we weren't big dessert fans anyway, it wasn't a big deal. The Mousetrap is an Agatha Christie comedic murder mystery with a surprising twist at the end. Neither of us had seen it before, but we both enjoyed it and felt that the 2+ hours we spent watching were well worth it. When the play ended around 11:15, Shirley had become progressively more comfortable with physical contact throughout the night, and I found myself appreciating both her body and personality more and more as the evening unfolded. As we reached my car, I asked, "Do you want to go to a club or do something else? The night is still young for us late 20-somethings. Shirley looked into my eyes with a gaze that was both intense and enigmatic. I couldn't quite decipher it before responding. Her question was the most surprising moment of an already surprising evening. After a deep sigh, she asked, "Have you ever engaged in intercourse on a first date?" It took me a moment to process her question, but I didn't ask her to repeat it. My response was measured. "No, why do you ask?" "Well, we know each other as well as people who have been dating every weekend for several months. The only thing we don't know about each other is how compatible we are in bed, or on a kitchen table, or in a swimming pool. Well, you get the idea. I feel a strong sexual attraction to you. If you feel the same way about me, let's make this a night of firsts for both of us," she said stoically, followed by a mischievous grin. I drew closer to her, enveloping her in my arms, and initiated a series of brief kisses that gradually escalated in intensity. The final kiss wasn't brief at all. It lasted a good 2 minutes and confirmed to me that she was not only a skilled kisser but also a genuinely warm person. When we finally broke apart, I inquired, "Would you like to see my etchings?" She chuckled and replied, "Lead the way." It's often said that only fools rush into intense relationships right after ending things with a cheating spouse, Shirley through divorce, and myself through more tragic circumstances involving murder. It seems Shirley and I are no exception to this rule. Upon arriving at my house, our sexual encounter wasn't hurried or frantic. We didn't hastily strip each other's clothes off. Instead, we stood face to face, locking eyes. By this point, I had come to appreciate Shirley's personality and her physique. Every part of her that could be discerned through her clothing appeared flawless. Although I have a particular affinity for large, firm buttocks, everything about her seemed perfectly proportioned, nothing too large or too small. Shirley methodically removed my shirt, her gaze unwaveringly fixed on mine. As she shrugged off my shirt, I voiced my desires. "I want to make love to you on the kitchen table." Without hesitation, she responded, bent over it or lying on top with my legs spread. The latter. "You'll have to do the heavy lifting," she teased. I planted a kiss on her lips and lifted her sculpted thighs so that her legs straddled my torso. With my eyes mostly closed, I maneuvered through the kitchen, occasionally bumping into walls, and gently laid her on the table. Fortunately, the only items on the table were documents and a few stainless steel utensils, nothing fragile, so I easily swept them aside with one hand before placing her on the tabletop. As we locked eyes once more, I reached under her dress to remove her panties, only to find none. "You're quite the minx, aren't you?" I grinned, to which she replied, "Damn right." I lifted her dress, revealing her bare pussy, and wasted no time diving in with unparalleled enthusiasm. She reclined on the table, her moans filling the room. Her pussy was a sight to behold, her labia and clit looked positively delectable. I eagerly devoured her, and she climaxed with astonishing speed, as if she were a racing car going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat. Once she came down from her peak, she murmured, "I thought you were going to fuck me." I was still a bit peckish, so I decided to have a snack first. I chuckled. "You devil," she said as she sat up and unbuckled my belt. By then, I was so aroused that I feared I might climax at any moment as she took hold of my throbbing cock with her right hand. I kissed her once more, gently moving her hand away with one hand while using the other to lower my pants and boxers. As my tip touched her pussy, she let out a low groan and reclined back on the table. With one powerful thrust, I buried myself inside her, eliciting a groan that sounded like an old truck engine struggling up a mountain. I maintained a rhythm akin to the 146 beats per minute in Bruno Mars' song Locked Out of Heaven, squeezing her firm ass with my hands as she uttered unintelligible sounds of pleasure. I climaxed quickly, fearing it might be premature, but her response assured me she was just as eager. After my first release into her, she began trembling as if experiencing a seizure. As my final release left me, I felt a wave of euphoria wash over me like never before. I think I rested my head between her breasts while my softening member remained inside her, and her moans evolved into contented purrs. Eventually, we both regained awareness. I lifted my torso, allowing my now softened cock to slip out of her, and she sat up. "Bed," she simply said. After hastily removing my clothing, she discarded her dress and unhooked her bra. She leaped into my arms, and I carried her upstairs to my bedroom, occasionally colliding with a wall in the process. While it wasn't a conscious decision on either of our parts, we ended up spending the entire weekend together. In bed, Shirley was uninhibited, enjoying titty fucks as much as vaginal intercourse and achieving nearly equal satisfaction. Although anal sex wasn't our preference, we gave it a try. She cherished cuddling and intimate contact, even when my cock wasn't involved. Outside of the bedroom, she was a delight to be around. She had a great sense of humor, genuine affection, a playful demeanor, and was easy to converse with on a wide range of topics. During breakfast at the very table where we had shared intimate moments less than 48 hours earlier, I recalled our conversation in my office. Between bites of omelet, I asked, "Shirley, amidst all the fun we had this weekend, I forgot to ask, did you convey my proposals to Suzanne and the other individual?" After swallowing a piece of English muffin, she replied, "Yes, Suzanne was thrilled and assured me of a full-time offer next week." After another bite, she continued, "But she advised against mentioning the proposal to the other person. He's well aware of his impending election loss due to your involvement, and he might delay my job offer if I confront him. Besides, Suzanne doubts he'll ever apologize and wants your lawsuit against him to proceed." I nodded in understanding as I continued to eat. Interestingly enough, though, Suzanne inquired if you had asked about her personally. Despite your outburst at the trial's conclusion, she seems hopeful for a relationship. She flashed me a mischievous grin after her remark. I grinned in response. "That's not happening. I've found something much better," I chuckled before finishing my breakfast. Pulling up in front of Shirley's apartment building, she surprised me with her forwardness, unlike anyone else I'd ever encountered. So, Lucas, we've only known each other for a few days, and yet we've discovered that we're more compatible both inside and outside the bedroom than anyone we've ever met or imagined. You know what a really smart guy would do, she teased, planting a quick but meaningful kiss on my lips. You'd ask me to move in with you this weekend, with the idea of getting me a ring after we've lived together for a few months. After another kiss and a smile, she darted out of the car, her pleasantly firm ass wiggling as she disappeared into the building without a backward glance. I pondered her proposition for a brief 30 seconds. Then, pulling out my cell phone, I dialed Shirley's number, now at the top of my contacts list. Hey, Shirley. I just had the best idea. How about you move in with me this weekend? I proposed. Lucas, that's so sudden. Are you sure about this? She responded. Yeah, I've been thinking about it for what feels like ages, I assured her. All right, she chuckled, but you'll have to cover my share of the apartment lease because Judy can't handle it on her own, she added before ending the call. Sneaky, I chuckled to myself. I could recount pages of our impulsive decision to dive into a relationship, how surprisingly well it turned out, and how it enriched both our lives. However, one particular moment encapsulates everything you need to know. I sat in the courtroom, watching 8 months pregnant Shirley Worthington deliver a brilliant closing argument in the murder and obstruction of justice trial of Will Watson for the deaths of Ashley Worthington and Brad Sidley. Shirley masterfully convinced the jury that Watson, in love with Ashley, was enraged by her affair with Sidley, leading him to kill Sidley and frame me to have Ashley to himself. Unfortunately, a stray bullet during the shooting also killed Ashley. As the jury left the box, I embraced Shirley, congratulating her and gently patting her belly. Upon returning from a brief break, we received word that the jury had reached a verdict. After Shirley received congratulations from everyone, including opposing counsel, I whispered in her ear, "Tonight, I'm treating you to a luxurious bubble bath, your favorite meal from the finest Italian restaurant, a foot rub, and then I'm going to make love to you." Shirley smiled, kissed me, and replied, "Sounds like a plan, and now you can't get me pregnant." Thanks for watching.